It has Apple's M3 Max chip with 16-core CPU, 40-core GPU with 420 gigabytes of RAM that you can.
The new M3 series versions of the MacBook Pro 14.
You see that it shows, I call the first generation Apple Silicon M1 Max MacBook Pro the best laptop I have ever used. And it is. I did it on this computer. The gap between M1 Max MacBook Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pro. But then Apple released M2 Max MacBook Pro, which was better. And then when it was time to release M3 Max MacBook Pro, and Apple said it is scary fast.
The M3 Max is the newest thing about this laptop, but unlike jump from M2 Max to M3 Max is spectacular.
I remembered what I saw while I was watching a video regarding Bugatti trying to break the speed limit. They were talking about how it gets more. When it comes to Geekbench 6, when we look at the single core
And MacBook Pro 16 have just landed. And it hasn't even been a year since the M2 model shipped. Fortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to test.
Score. Of course, M3 Max MacBook Pro scores higher than M2 Max and M1 Max MacBook Pro. But when we switch to multi-core score,
this is the new M3 Max powered MacBook Pro in the all-new Space Black.
Notice your Mac is wrapped in paper, not plastic. Let's pull on.
Or M3 Max MacBook Pro scores 43.3% higher than M2 Max MacBook Pro and 68.4%.
Right now, it's the most powerful piece of Apple on our test. It is something else. And we're also going to answer the question, who is this laptop for? This new design.
When it comes to compute scores, M3 Max MacBook Pro scores 10.9% higher than M2 Max MacBook Pro and 29.8%.
Either of them yet. But I've had enough time with them that I'm pretty comfortable with the opinions that I have formed, both good and bad. The M3 Pro and
percent higher. When it comes to Cinebench 2024, when we look at the GPU test, it scores 112% higher than M2 Max MacBook Pro.
Tab and set it aside for later. First up, the design and also color matched is a braided MagSafe cable, and last but not least, a 140-watt charger. By the way, the
and 182% higher than M1 Max MacBook Pro. When it comes to CPU, the multi-core score 65.8% higher than M2 Max MacBook Pro.
Kind of has like a modern look, but for me, because I have big hands. All right, so here's a better look at the anti-fingerprint resistance. If you read Apple.
And 103.8% higher than M1 Max MacBook Pro. When it comes to CPU single core score, it is 17.5% higher than
M3 Max models of both the 14 and the 16 now come in an elegant, semi-glossy dark gray dubbed Space Black. Apple touts the Space Black
to Max MacBook Pro and 24.7% higher than M1 Max MacBook Pro.
Look at that. Very nice. Apple says the finish on this Space Black is designed to greatly reduce finger.
Max MacBook Pro, but this one
website, they say it's anodized to lessen fingerprints. It's not just marketing bluster. You're still going to get fingerprints, obviously. For my work, which is just basic.
When it comes to write speed, it is 19.3% faster than M2 Max MacBook Pro and 16.3% faster than M1 Max MacBook Pro. And when it comes to read
version as being fingerprint resistant, at least on the top, the completely smudged up silver one. I really can see smudges here. Of course,
speeds there head to head, there's not much difference. My M1 Max MacBook Pro has 8 terabytes of space, and when I was first buying it, of course, it was very expensive.
Fingerprint, something that my sort of black Midnight MacBook Air struggles with the silver MacBook Pro and the Space Gray model. There's nothing.
And it was not easy to afford it. But when I started using it, the comfort 8 terabyte gave me was incredible. And on M2 Max MacBook Pro, I switched to 4 terabyte.
word processing, watching videos, the laptop. This is the machine you want. This thing can just churn through when it comes to the rendering speeds of Max.
Final Cut Pro 10. When it comes to exporting a giant 8K project to ProRes 422, and one Max MacBook Pro finished this task in 7 minutes. And
It's also the part of the laptop that you touch the most. If I paid $4,000 for the system, I'd get annoyed fast. My annoyance level would probably decrease.
M2 Max MacBook Pro finished this task in 6 minutes and 13 seconds. This machine, M3 Max MacBook Pro, finished it in 5 minutes and
like it in the market today. While improvements are all around, the focus this year has been on the GPU side of things. So anything to do with graphics is going to get a
24 seconds. And to put that in perspective, and then I applied noise reduction in Final Cut Pro. Of course, this is a very GPU heavy process. And
Machine. And what do you think of the differences?
M2 Max, it was good, but that's when those numbers start to become really exciting because as we found an edit,
I applied it to a 1-minute video that I shot on my iPhone in ProRes HQ in Apple Log, and the noise reduction amount was set to default. And one Max
as the price decreased though. The MacBook Pro 14's biggest changes come only in the M3 model, which is new to the line. By adding a low-end option,
MacBook Pro finished this task in 1 minute 35 seconds. M2 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 1 minute 15 seconds, which is an improvement. This guy finished it in
major boost, so other workloads can be handled at the same time. This is going to make a huge impact when it comes to gaming, but really any app that uses the GPU
59 seconds, which is really close to M2 Ultra. Use any of the CPU or the GPU, so the results were equal.
is going to take me maybe 15 or 30. It starts to actually justify its price.
Yeah, and I'm glad you say that because this will save you time and money. And right now,
Among all the devices, and I'm guessing that's gonna change when Apple releases an optimized M3 optimized version of.
Apple can hit a $1,600 price that on one hand makes it attractive to volume buyers and budget-minded consumers who really want a MacBook.
Final Cut, Compressor, Motion 5, or Logic. So there were some, tasks that didn't use anything, and it was just the computer was like, okay, I'll do it. And we have
You will also benefit. Photo and video editing, 3D rendering, more specialized medical apps, all of it. Which among other things lets the fans spin
a counter there. All right, we're set to better performance. Let's see what happens.
Right off the bat, we're seeing 4 minutes and 7 seconds versus, 14 minutes? We're at about 37, almost 40%, whereas we still have about 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes to keep fluctuating there. But we're about done here with the M3 Max, and we're ready to move on to our next.
We're gonna have a couple of frames to show how the counter goes.
Pro. But physically it's a little stripped down compared to its M3 Pro and M3 Max siblings. Those limitations are imposed by the chip and the motherboard layout though.
The GPU usage is at 79%.
For example, there are only 2 Thunderbolt connections, and they're both on the left side along with the MagSafe connector. It does mean that all of your charging options are on the left side.
80%. It's just going. I think this is the first device. We're at 77%.
faster, so you get top sustained performance for longer. It used to only be available on 16-inch models running M1 Max or M2 Max, but now
GPU use. iPhone 13 Pro Max review. Let's delete all the generated files.
Thankfully, though, we are seeing a lot more AAA games coming out, right? It shows you what can happen when you have games optimized. I got to play these games and you could...
So there's no proxy, there's no render.
And it can only drive a single high-res external monitor if you're using that plus the built-in display. And speaking of the built-in display, they both use the same.
Now let's move here. Yeah,
also available on M3 Max models running on both 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. To enable it, go into Settings, Battery, on.
As you can see, it's just, we're just going. We have no trouble at all. So keep that in mind. Let's go inside this project.
All the difference, like, it is stunning. So it really gives me a good sense of where Apple could go if you have games not only optimized for the system, but also.
When you're scrubbing, of course, there's still a little jumping, especially if we go here.
Bright liquid retina XDR panels as the previous models, but now the system supplies more power to them in standard dynamic range. So
See, when I scrub here, it's a lot faster, but over here, there's a little jump here and there. There's a little, but it is getting better.
Power adapter.
And better. It immediately plays back. It is so much better. When it comes to Lightroom and exporting photos, I took 100 photos from my Sony A1 50 point.
When you have developers actually coming
On board with it.
yeah, knows what memory to use and what not to use. So it, like, if you're playing a game, it's processes, right? And
1 megapixel monster camera, and I took the raw files and put it in Lightroom, and I started exporting.
the max brightness now increases from 500 nits to 600 nits. That's mostly important. They still have the notch though, which doesn't bother me as
It. So M1 Max MacBook Pro finished this in 33 seconds, which is fantastic. M2 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 27 seconds, which is
Need more ports and want that better display. Also, good news. Otherwise, if you're a Pro user, definitely consider a MacBook Pro with either M3 Pro.
even better. This machine finished it. M3 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 19 seconds. This is so close to M2 Ultra Max.
Apple says it's an industry first, but based on what I've seen, I have to believe Apple. I think this thing's a real deal, and I'm curious to see if other companies will adapt their own
Studio. And then I copied and pasted settings to the photos, and M1 Max MacBook Pro finished this in 6 seconds. M2 Max MacBook Pro
much only because I use a solid black background. When there's a bright wallpaper, yuck. The chips really don't change much about the feature sets of the early
5 seconds, and then this guy in 3 seconds, which is once again, and I bounced it to 24-bit WAV file, and this song has 104
version of dynamic caching. Who needs to crunch through 8K videos, or if you're a gamer that's very excited over the future of Mac gaming,
40 plus tracks. M1 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 42 seconds. M2 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 40 seconds. M3 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 28
models though. For the maxed out 16-core M3 Max, Apple basically ditched the idea of balanced numbers of cores.
8 seconds, and M2 Ultra finished it in 28. An image that I downloaded, it's a demo project. And you can render this in 2 ways. You can either use
should consider this laptop. Yes, it is very expensive. I would actually suggest the MacBook Pro 14-inch with a regular M3 processor. That'll get you through everything.
The CPU or the GPU. So to see the CPU difference, I first picked the CPU, and M1 Max finished it in 17 minutes and 29 seconds. M2,
i.e. the performance and the efficiency cores. And instead just said, okay, here, mostly performance and a few efficiency. So you have something.
Max MacBook Pro finished it in 14 minutes and 56 seconds. M3 Max MacBook Pro finished it in 8 minutes and 45 seconds. M2 Ultra finished the same task in
or M3 Max. If you're into music production with hundreds of layers and multiple plugins and effects. Speaking of video editing, instead of just one, M3
7 minutes and 34 seconds. When you switch to GPU, which you probably should, M1 Max MacBook Pro finishes the same task, the same image in 3 minutes and 8 seconds.
Left over to drive the interface. And though I haven't yet tested for power throttling or stability while on battery, it still generally runs at full speed. That
Max has 2 video encode and decode engines and 2 ProRes accelerators, giving this model support for up to 48 streams of
M2 Max MacBook Pro finishes in 2 minutes and 26 seconds, and M3 Max MacBook Pro finishes in 1 minute and 19 seconds. M2 Ultra finishes in
4K and up to 13 streams of 8K ProRes video. There's nothing quite like a MacBook Pro display. I mean, just look.
That means you can game pretty well on battery, though I don't know yet for how long. The flip side is that the best M3 Pro in the MacBook Pro 14 may
1 minute and 30, while you're not watching HDR, is brighter with the new M3 MacBook Pro. And I tested it and I found out with my luck
that HDR content or just enjoy consuming HDR content like Marvel's Endgame on Disney+. When viewing HDR content, the panel
may not gain as much performance as you'd expect over the previous top M2 Pro. Now it's more even. It also has lower memory bandwidth and one less
meter that it is for M1 Max MacBook Pro and M2 Max MacBook Pro was giving me 580 lux, and this in the
which is a peak brightness of 1600 nits and 1000 nits of sustained brightness, while viewing non-HDR content, or SDR, 600 nits
GPU core. But you should still see some gains thanks to the move to the 3nm fab process, improved overall efficiency, and updates to some of the graphics algorithms.
SDR mode gave me 730 lux. When you switch to HDR, they're pretty much the same, but M3 Max MacBook Pro was brighter. It gave me 1400,
which is 20% brighter than on previous models. While MacBook Airs have only 2 USB-C Thunderbolt 4 ports and a headphone jack, MacBook Pros have plenty.
Personally, I like the size and the weight of the 14-inch model best, but the bigger screen of the 16 can't be beat. Of course, it's also $4,000.
lux, where the other ones were giving me 1350 and 60 lux. When you don't look at a full screen, but you look at something like
Plenty of ports on both sides. There's a dedicated SDXC card slot, full-sized HDMI, headphone jack is there too, and of course, USB Thunderbolt.
At least the way our test unit was configured. And if $4,000 is a little too much for you, it does start at $2,500 if that's a little more.
like this, that section of the screen becomes even brighter. And when I did that, M3 Max MacBook Pro had 1890 lux.
4. 2 on the M3 model and 3 on the M3 Pro and M3 Max. And if you're one of them, make sure to get at least an M3 Pro model.
And it's quiet, even when fans are running. Plus, it's got excellent battery life for its class.
Which was a little ahead of M2 Max and M1 Max MacBook Pro. So when it comes to, all right, now I think because it is,
They support 2 displays up to 6K resolution, while the M3 Max model supports 3 via Thunderbolt up to 6K, and 1 more
the resolution is so high, you do not see this because it's super tiny, but I'm playing in
via HDMI for a grand total of 4. Apple's talked about it a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised if next year or so, people will see the Mac or
60 frames per second, and I can move around, you know, I can play the game all I want.
PC gaming. Many AAA titles are promised, and there's no better machine to run these games than an M3 powered Mac. Alongside all the
When you start playing a game, it switches to the game mode, which puts everything it has into
GPU improvements that I talked about earlier. Hardware accelerated ray tracing is also now available on a Mac. You can expect high performance, sustained higher frame rates, and
the computer. And I actually just realized this, we're not plugged into power right now. We're playing on battery. This thing also has the AV1 decoder, and what that means is anything being
even better graphics. Plus, with game mode on macOS Sonoma, the system will prioritize your gaming needs when you're in full screen. I recently put on my
streamed to your computer that you watch, like Twitch, YouTube, and other streaming services. It can use the AV1 decoder, which takes less space, gives you higher quality.
M3 Max powered 16-inch MacBook Pro with high performance mode on, promising the same level of performance on this year's models. This means up to 22 hours of video playback and
Image, which is going to be easier to watch with wasting, less internet and less data. So that's really nice to have on this computer. When it comes to this color,
up to 15 hours of wireless web browsing. A little bit less on the more powerful M3 Pro and M3 Max, up to 18 hours of video playback and 12 hours of wireless.
I actually love it. It really shows the capability of this device. I mean, the keys usually show more fingerprints.
It lasted me more than a day of average use. Depending on which model you pick, you'll get either a 70 watt, 96 watt, or 140 watt adapter.
It has 3 microphone array and it has 6 speakers with force cancelling, and it sounds as good as M2 Max MacBook Pro. It is the same weight, same size, everything
in the box with a matching MagSafe cable. Charging is super fast. In our Gadget Match charge test, a 30-minute charge powers the laptop to the promised 50.
Physically is the same, so if you have a case for this, it's gonna match. Now my wish list, some wallpapers here. This.
50%. A full charge on my 16-inch model took just over an hour and 30 minutes.
This. And then this. So they put my initial there. Thank you very much.
Go out and buy an M3 powered MacBook Pro. I can go on and on, but simply put,
I think it's an F. Yeah, thank you. So that's pretty much it. That's what I've seen from my tests, from everything